BlackBerry once reigned as the king of smartphones, selling more than 50 million units at its peak.
Things have gone from bad to worse for BlackBerry. Its smartphones, once a must-have, are now so unpopular, millions of them are sitting on shelves unsold. And the result is staggering. BlackBerry lost $1 billion in the last quarter. The stock price plummeted 16% today. Thousands of employees are going to lose their jobs.
Donna, the rumors were true. BlackBerry announcing it indeed is going to cut 4,500 jobs. That's nearly 40% of its workforce.
That iconic QWERTY keyboard on your phone. Almost everyone wanted one. Yeah, you're right on what you're thinking. It's the BlackBerry phone. It disappeared, and people started switching. You think BlackBerry died because it couldn't keep up. That's the comfortable lie. The reality? In 2007, BlackBerry's leadership held the iPhone's specs in their hands, labeled it a lethal threat, and then chose to do nothing. They didn't miss the disruption. They saw it, analyzed it, and decided they were too big to break. This isn't just a story about a better phone. It is the story of a deliberate, dangerous failure. They saw it coming and blinked. Bold strategy. So who actually killed BlackBerry? The market that moved, or the men who refused to? Did innovation bury them, or did they bury themselves? If you want to see how the company that built the world's most addictive keyboard got beaten by a phone with no keyboard at all, hit like and subscribe, and let's decode it together here on Money Decoded. Here is something worth sitting with before we go further. BlackBerry did not fail because they were weak. They failed because they were dominant. And dominance, if you are not careful, is just arrogance wearing a better suit. In 1984, Mike Lazaridis and his childhood friend Douglas Fregan founded Research in Motion in Waterloo, Ontario. Not Silicon Valley, not New York. A Canadian engineering town that built things because problems needed solving, not because someone needed a pitch deck to close a Series A. The problem they were solving was specific. Business communication was slow, fragmented, and physically chained to a desk. Their answer was a device that pushed email directly to your pocket in real time, before the world had even decided that was something it needed. 8 years later, in 1992, a Harvard-trained businessman named Jim Balsillie invested $125,000 into RIM and joined as co-CEO. Lazaridis ran the technology. Balsillie ran the business. Together, they turned a scrappy engineering shop into a global empire. And together, much later, they would make the calls that ended it. By 1999, they launched the BlackBerry 850, physical, QWERTY keyboard. Battery life measured in days, built for one kind of person, the executive who needed to be reachable everywhere, always, instantly. The White House was using it by 2002. Wall Street couldn't function without it by 2003. By September 2010, BlackBerry controlled 37% of the US smartphone market. More than 1 in 3 smartphones sold in America had that keyboard on it. The device earned a nickname nobody at RIM had to manufacture, Crackberry, because people used it with the compulsive frequency of something they weren't entirely proud of. Barack Obama publicly refused to give his up during the presidential transition, a sitting president negotiating to keep his phone. That is not brand loyalty. That is dependency. And in business, dependency is the best moat you can build. The keyboard was the covenant. Executives typed replies blind, mid-meeting, without breaking eye contact across a conference table. It wasn't just a feature, it was a flex. And here is where it gets interesting, because the very thing that made BlackBerry untouchable was slowly teaching its own leadership the wrong lesson. When your product becomes infrastructure, it is very easy to confuse being necessary with being permanent. Those are not the same thing, not even close. By 2006, RIM's co-CEO structure had stopped generating productive friction. The two of them had built something extraordinary together. At the top, they had also built an echo chamber worth nearly $75 billion. And nobody left in the building brave enough to say the wrong thing out loud. They called it Crackberry and didn't see the irony. Also, $75 billion and not one person in that room willing to play devil's advocate. When Steve Jobs walked on stage in January 2007 and held up a phone with no physical keyboard, just glass, edge to edge, BlackBerry's reaction was logical. Almost impressively so. Touchscreens were imprecise. You couldn't type without staring at your hands. Business users had muscle memory. Real professionals had real keyboards. A glass slab was a toy for people who didn't have actual emails to send. Lazaridis said it publicly. The iPhone's on-screen keyboard was a step backward for anyone who needed to communicate at real speed. Balsillie told investors the market would self-correct toward functionality. And look, I would have nodded along in that room. The argument was clean. It was logical. It was backed by real data about real users doing real work. It was also, catastrophically, the wrong question entirely. Technically correct, completely irrelevant, the worst kind of right. Because BlackBerry was asking, is the iPhone a better communication tool? The actual question, the one that mattered, was, does anyone still care about the best communication tool, or do they just want the most desirable object in their pocket? Those are different markets. They require completely different strategies, and confusing them is not a technology mistake. It is a financial one, because you end up protecting revenue from a customer base that is quietly becoming someone else's customer base while calling it loyalty. Apple wasn't trying to beat BlackBerry at enterprise email. Apple was making the phone personal. A mirror, not a tool. BlackBerry had built the world's best instrument for productivity. Apple built the world's most desirable object for identity. Same pocket, completely different logic. And here's the dry part. BlackBerry's engineers were right that the keyboard was better for typing. They were just solving for a competition that had already ended. The company that prided itself on understanding what serious people needed never once stopped to ask whether serious people still wanted to be seen as serious. That question would have cost nothing to ask. The failure to ask it cost everything. They won the argument, lost the market, kept the trophy. By 2010, the evidence wasn't a forecast. It was an invoice. Apple's App Store had surpassed 300,000 applications. BlackBerry's App World, launched in 2009, a full 2 years after the iPhone, looked by comparison like a corner store beside a city that never sleeps. The consumer market was already gone. RIM's official position was that enterprise would hold. Compliance mandates, IT approval chains, security requirements. The logic made sense on paper. Paper did not save them. BlackBerry hit its US peak of 37% market share in September 2010, and then fell off a cliff. By 2012, global market share had collapsed to under 5%. Revenue slid from $19.9 billion in fiscal 2011 and never recovered. The stock had peaked at $147 in 2008. By 2012, it was below $10. I looked at that number 3 times, because a company worth nearly $75 billion at peak was now trading like a distressed regional lender, and the product still worked. The keyboard still clicked. The email still pushed. Nothing was broken. The world had simply signed a different covenant without telling them. Here is the number that should genuinely stop you. In the fourth quarter of 2013, BlackBerry shipped 1.7 million handsets. Apple sold 51 million iPhones in the same 3 months. That is not a gap. That is not even the same conversation. And the mechanism that finally broke RIM's last lock on enterprise was almost embarrassingly simple. Corporations started letting employees use their personal iPhones for work email. BYOD. Bring your own device. A policy so mundane it sounds like a potluck rule, it dissolved a decade of institutional entrenchment in a single HR memo. The moat wasn't stormed. The residents filed an expense report and walked out. A decade of corporate dominance. One HR memo, done. They didn't lose a war. They lost a policy update. Through 2011 and into 2012, Balsillie stood in front of investors with the practiced calm of someone who had decided that confidence was a strategy. Enterprise demand was resilient. BlackBerry 10.
The new BlackBerry Z10, which is more than just a new BlackBerry. This is really the first phone from Research in Motion running the BlackBerry 10 operating system. It's all new, from the Flow experience to the BlackBerry Hub experience to the new keyboard.
The new operating system that would reset everything was on schedule. The narrative was orderly. The data was not. Confidence as a strategy. Classic. Works great right up until it doesn't. Here's what makes this chapter genuinely uncomfortable. BlackBerry 10, when it finally launched in early 2013, was actually good. Reviewers called it elegant. Some said it was the best BlackBerry ever made. The engineering team had delivered something real, and it sold so poorly that the company took a nearly $1 billion write-down on unsold inventory within months of launch. $1 billion of product sitting in a warehouse, fully built, completely functional, utterly unwanted. That is not a product failure. That is a market timing failure, which is a business failure, which means somebody in the financial planning room should have asked much harder questions much earlier about whether the audience still existed. What they could not spin away was the enterprise data. By 2012, major corporations across America were quietly rolling out iPhones to their employees and rewriting their device policies. The security certifications, the IT mandates, the compliance contracts, all of it was being dismantled by the same organizations that had made BlackBerry indispensable. Nobody announced it. There was no press release. The castle was not stormed. The people inside it simply updated their device preferences in the company portal and moved on. $1 billion of phones. Just sitting there. Fully functional, completely ignored. The world's most expensive inventory. In January 2012, Mike Lazaridis and Jim Balsillie resigned as co-CEOs on the same day, together, the way they had always operated. The men who built Research in Motion from a Waterloo. Engineering shop into a company worth nearly $75 billion left the way they ran it. In agreement, which if you have been paying attention was exactly the problem. Thorsten Heinz replaced them. An insider, a BlackBerry man through and through. The board's choice communicated something precise without meaning to. We believe this is an execution problem, not a structural one. The market responded the way markets respond to decisions that miss the point. No rally, no relief. Sideways. Heinz lasted less than 2 years before John Chen, an actual turnaround specialist, the first true outsider in company history, was handed what remained. By then the math was settled. Apple owned the consumer market permanently. Android had absorbed everything adjacent. BlackBerry announced the end of its handset business in 2016. They replaced 2 insiders with another insider. The definition of doing something while changing nothing. And then the final indignity, the one that should make you pause. The physical keyboard, the Covenant, the engineering crown jewel, the feature Lazaridis had publicly declared irreplaceable, was discontinued by the very company that built it. The thing they said no serious person would ever give up was given up first by the people who made it. If that is not the universe having a sense of humor, I do not know what is. The damage that cannot be undone is not the market share number, it is the noun. BlackBerry used to be what you called the category. Now it is a trivia answer. 3 things are true about this story that never show up in the headline version. Being right about your product is not the same as being right about your market, and confusing the two is one of the most expensive mistakes a leadership team can make because it feels like confidence while it is actually happening. Institutional loyalty has a price ceiling. The moment a corporation gives its employees a choice between obligation and preference, obligation loses every time inside a single budget cycle. And the most dangerous quarter in any dominant company's history is never the one where a competitor launches. It is the one 18 months later when the internal narrative has calcified around the idea that the threat wasn't real. Nokia ran this same play. Same window, same competitor, same denial, same result. 2 of the most powerful mobile companies in the world watching identical disruption unfold in real time, both choosing to protect what they had built instead of questioning whether what they had built still fit the world they were operating in. At a certain altitude, that kind of blindness stops being a personality flaw and starts being a structural one. The natural outcome of building an organization that rewards agreement and mistakes tenure for vision. Nokia watched BlackBerry collapse in real time and thought, yeah, same. 2 different companies. 1 identical mistake. Impressive range, the irony that should stay. With you longest, BlackBerry was not killed by a better keyboard. It was killed by the complete elimination of the keyboard, by a product that looked at their greatest competitive advantage and decided it was unnecessary. And BlackBerry's response was to defend that advantage louder. They doubled down on the covenant while the world rewrote the contract. You already know a company doing this right now. Most people watching this will nod, close the tab, and never apply a single thing. You know exactly who, and they're probably fine with it. That's the point. How about you? If you had to go back, would you still choose BlackBerry or switch to Apple earlier? Share your answer in the comments. Are you Team Apple or Team BlackBerry? Thanks for watching. If you actually enjoy being part of this decoding circle, you already know what to do. Hit subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.